Hello, this is Domenico with Easynomics, and today we're going to look at profit maximization versus revenue maximization versus sales maximization. So we're looking at alternative objectives of the firm other than profit maximization. You can find this video within different playlists, particularly playlists related to theory of the firm. You can also use this magnifying glass to search for any particular topic within the channel. So let's go ahead and begin graphing and analyzing these different objectives of the firm. So one objective of the firm is profit maximization. You learn early in the course that households generate income from providing their factors of production, which includes land, labor, capital, and the entrepreneur generating profit from their entrepreneurial skills. So the entrepreneur generates a form of income, which is profit. So it makes sense that they're incentivized to maximize that profit as income to bring back to their household. It follows the rule that the firm will produce where MR equals MC, which is where profit is maximized. I'll provide a link to a video that explains that in more detail, where we can see the profit function and how that profit function is at max, where the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. So we're going to illustrate profit maximization in this model, and then we'll move on to revenue maximization and then sales maximization. So in this provided model, we have price cost revenue on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. We have our downward sloping revenue curves, our demand curve equal to our marginal benefit equal to average revenue, and our marginal revenue curve that's less than the average revenue because we assume that the firm does not price discriminate. There'll be another link to a video that explains why the MR would be less than the AR if the firm does not price discriminate. Then we have our upward sloping supply curve equal to marginal cost. It intersects with ATC at its lowest point. Minimum ATC would be productively efficient. And so here we have our model. So let's go ahead and identify where profit maximization would occur, graph it, highlight some areas, and then we'll move on to revenue maximization. So profit maximization occurs where MR equals MC. So here's our supply curve. When we follow our supply curve, the firm will produce the quantity supplied up until MR equals MC, and then they're going to stop. And then they're going to set their output at that quantity. So we need to illustrate that. So here is a quantity at pi for profit max. And they're going to price according to their demand curve. That's a little bit off. Let me just try that once again. So this is what people are willing and able to pay. So we'll call this price at profit being maximized. And then we have the cost per unit, average cost per unit here. So I'll call that C at the profit maximization level of output. And then I'm going to shade in the area to identify the abnormal profit generated by the firm, which is going to the entrepreneur that owns the firm. Okay, and then we'll label this pi for profit. We want to remember that the symbol pi is in economics the symbol for profit. Okay, so here we see that the firm produces a quantity, profit max, and here they have this significant abnormal profit. And that abnormal profit, in theory, can't get any larger than at this point where MR equals MC. And so the entrepreneur will take that profit back home as a form of income. Now let's move on to revenue maximization. There'll be another link to another video that explains in more detail about MR equals 0, and that's actually quite important for a few different reasons, which I'll explain in just a moment. So revenue maximization, just to go over this. Let's suppose that the firm's management is separated from the firm's entrepreneur, perhaps with a firm that's owned by an entrepreneur. Maybe they're also managing it, they're operating it, right? They're operating it, they own it, they're managing it, they're part of all that decision making, and so they are very profit driven. Let's say that the firm gets larger and larger over time and that the owner can't do everything, so they're going to have to separate and create different management teams. So here we have the firm's management being separated from the firm's owner, the entrepreneur. So that creates a conflict of motivation between the two groups. In that case, the incentives are not aligned between the entrepreneur, who is profit-driven, and the firm's managers, who may be more revenue-driven, more revenue earned by the firm. Perhaps they get a commission or they get a bonus from that, so they're more motivated by driving sales, potentially. So here we have the entrepreneur can incentivize the firm's managers through commissions, bonuses based on increased revenue. Since there's a misalignment between the incentives, the entrepreneur very profit driven, the manager's not very profit driven because they don't take that profit home as a form of income. They just take their wages home. So the entrepreneur may have to sacrifice some of his profit to motivate his managers. Thus, the firm's management will be revenue driven if it's provided a commission on sales or bonuses based on meeting certain targets, and they're going to strive to maximize that revenue through increased sales of output. So if revenue is being maximized, the total revenue function will be at max, where MR equals 0. And so we identify that point right here, where MR hits the x-axis. And then we go up, and we're going to illustrate the price that, let me just do that one more time. It's a little bit misaligned. Here we go. The price that people are willing and able to pay at that quantity of output. Okay. So here we have price at revenue maximization. I'll call that P and R, price for revenue maximization. And then here we see the costs at revenue maximization. So I'll call that costs at revenue maximization. So we see reduced profit being generated here. The difference between the average revenue on the demand curve and the cost per unit. So I'm going to illustrate that reduced profit for the entrepreneur. That's a sacrifice being made by the entrepreneur. He's sacrificing profit and providing an incentive for his managers to increase revenue, and so on. So here we see this reduced revenue, this reduced abnormal profit with revenue maximization. Okay. Again, you can see average revenue here greater than average total costs here at where MR equals 0. Okay. Now, what are the benefits of revenue maximization? What's the incentive for the entrepreneur to sacrifice some of his profit to motivate his managers? Well, number one, sales can be easily measured on an hourly, daily, or monthly basis. We can see in real time how many units are being sold each day, each hour, each month. However, with profits, it takes time to calculate its value because we got to figure out what are the total costs. And total costs are not really determined until the end of the month, where all of the variable and fixed costs have come through at that month. So sales is easily measurable, and we can motivate. Here we have reason number two, sales targets can be an incentive, a motivator, and a means of generating competition between sales teams and managers. Really motivates them. You can get one sales team pitted against another. You can measure how many units have been sold by each team per day. So it really drives that revenue for the firm. A sales-driven firm will likely generate an increase in revenue, in theory, greater than the rate at which costs are rising. So here we see, yes, costs are going up, but the rate of revenue is increasing faster. So there's still profit. This orange shaded area is illustrative of that profit being generated, that abnormal profit. Another big benefit of revenue maximization is that it provides the firm the ability to price discriminate. They're going to provide a variety of different prices along that demand curve to capture all of the different willingness among consumers to buy a particular good. People have different elasticities of demand for a particular good, and so firms are able to price differently to different consumers. So price competition can come into play here. And that price competition also allows the firm to be providing prices that are competitive if they're operating in a very competitive market structure. All right, so those are some of the benefits there. Now, some additional talking points, some additional knowledge areas is that where MR equals 0, that's halfway across the demand curve. So at this point here, PED is equal to 1. And so the area left of that, if I was to illustrate that, the area left of that point, here you have PED being elastic. And the area to the right of that is where PED would be inelastic. So that's important knowledge to carry as an IB student, particularly high-level students need to know this. Where MR hits 0, you're halfway across demand, so the PED value is equal to 1. Left of it, elastic. To the right of it, inelastic. Okay. Now let's move on to our final point here. Let's use a different color. Let's see here. I'll use maybe red. Sales maximization. This occurs where average revenue equals average total cost. Thus, the firm is generating normal profit. They're operating at break even. They have eliminated their abnormal profit. What's the benefit? Why would a firm do this? The firm can increase the rate at which they capture market share. They're providing very low competitive prices. They're trying to become the cheaper substitute. They grab market share. They expand in size within that particular industry as they grab market share. And as they grab market share, they eventually get more market power. And as they get more market power in the long run, they can then begin to raise price and generate profit. All right. So firms that are trying to aggressively expand may be sales maximizing. So that occurs where AR equals ATC. They're going to produce where they are operating at normal profit. So they've completely sacrificed their abnormal profit. Right? So here's AR, here's ATC. And so we're looking for where they intersect, and they intersect right here, right at that point. So I'm going to draw that. So that gives you more output relative to the other points, but you end up with normal profit. Okay? So let me also label this. This is quantity at revenue maximization, and the red line is highlighting quantity at sales maximization. Here we have price. It's running out of space. I'll just put it here. Price at sales. And at price at sales, AR equals ATC. At that point, AR equals ATC. The firm is generating more normal profit, but you get more output. So you can see that with each of these objectives of the firms, it really impacts the quantity of output. Profit maximization, you get really reduced quantity. Revenue maximization, a little bit more output. And then when you get sales maximization, even more output here. So you see how the output increases as you go from profit max to revenue max to sales maximization. And then with that, you can just go over how this impacts aspects of stakeholders. We already know with profit maximization, we are increasing producer surplus at the expense of consumer surplus. Well, consumer surplus decreases. So that is an evaluative talking point about the pros and cons of profit maximization. With sales maximization, or with this point, we can actually increase consumer surplus. Because you're driving price down to grab market share, so that increases consumer surplus and it reduces producer surplus. All right, and that's it. So I just wanted to go over those three objectives of the firm, identify where they would be in a model, comparing the prices and the quantity of output, and that's it. I don't want to make it too more complicated to illustrate welfare losses and so forth. I have other models that highlight that, but that was the objective of this video. If you have any questions, you can feel free to comment those questions below, and don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thank you so much.